Glad you could join me on this odyssey. Being a landlord means learning how to investigate complaints. Today I'll share with you my process. Acknowledge the complaint. First, I acknowledge the complaint. I find simply explaining that you will look into the concern helps diffuse a stressful situation. Respond to the tenant promptly, expressing that their concern has been received and will be investigated. Maintain a professional and empathetic tone to demonstrate that you take their complaint seriously. As part of the complaint process, I require the complaint to be provided in writing. I'm always cognizant that a complaint may escalate to an actionable issue, and I will need all evidence documented, and this starts with the written complaint. Fortunately, in my experience, I've found that most complaints can be addressed and resolved in a professional manner without escalation or legal action. Verify whether the complaint is valid. Before I act, I need to determine if the complaint falls under normal living conditions or is unreasonable and therefore a valid complaint. Example, footsteps or children playing are usually normal noises. People laughing in the outdoor patio would usually be considered normal noises, while persistent loud music late at night would likely qualify as unreasonable, as might the ongoing thumping of weights banging on the floor. Once I've determined the complaint is likely valid, I'd launch an investigation. Gather specific details. Next, I gather all the specific details from the tenant, including dates and times the noise occurred, type of noise such as loud music, banging, yelling, etc., frequency and duration of the disturbance, any witnesses or other tenants affected. If the person complaining indicates a number of dates and times related to the complaint, then I will ask them to provide a log with the information. If they don't have dates or times now but claim the issue is consistent, I'll ask them to maintain a log, so I may better investigate in the future. If the police or bylaw were involved, I'll ask for any details related to contact with the authorities, including the officers' names or the incident occurrence number. Review lease agreements and local noise ordinances. Once I have the basics, I'll check the lease agreement for any specific clauses or rules regarding the nature of the complaint. For example, if the issue is related to smoking in the unit and the unit was rented as a non-smoking unit, I'll double-check the lease to ensure the clauses are actually in the lease. Additionally, I check any local laws that may be related to the complaint to ensure compliance and clarify expectations. For example, our city has a noise bylaw that identifies quiet time from 11 p.m. through 6 a.m. Now, this particular bylaw does not state what quiet is. There is no actual decibel rating associated with quiet time. So there is much ambiguity, which can sometimes make it challenging for a landlord to determine what is too noisy. For me, I look at the facts. If the complaint was related to a noise complaint and the details indicate there were at least 4 people in the apartment after 11 p.m., and the music, laughing and associated noises could be heard by outside the unit, down the hallway or into neighboring units, then the noise is not considered normal living noise during the quiet hours as dictated by the local ordinance. Now, one of my rentals is in the country and that area doesn't have noise bylaws. In this case, I have to determine what would be considered normal noise at any time of the day versus excessive noise, and I base that on what a reasonable person would consider excessive. In each instance, the landlord's investigative facts and research will help them make a determination that, if challenged, can stand on its merits. Collect independent evidence. Collecting independent evidence is also an important part of any investigation. A landlord cannot rely solely on a complaint for facts. Personal biases often skew the information. Independent evidence can be collected in many different ways. I might visit the property to see damage for myself and take photos, or go and speak with potential witnesses about the complaint received. I could also check my cameras to see if anything untoward was captured on film. It's worthwhile to ask other tenants if they have experienced the same issue to corroborate the complaint. If it's an ongoing issue, I'll ask the tenant for their log. My investigation may include photos of the concerns, video of the area, speaking to witnesses, or spending more time at the property to see the situation for myself. For example, if the complaint is that the front entry is littered with cigarette butts, but the tenant doesn't know who might be responsible, I check the camera to determine who is littering. If the complaint is related to a domestic dispute and/or police action, I would interview the person making the complaint, the tenant the complaint is about, and any potential witnesses. Every bit of documentation helps complete the puzzle and sets the stage for the next actions. Contact the alleged source of the complaint. Once I have some details and have confirmed the complaint is likely a valid complaint, I would likely approach the tenant or occupant about the complaint received. I would address the matter professionally, explaining the complaint without disclosing who made it. Don't forget to give them an opportunity to respond or explain their side. You never know, the complaint may not be valid. This tenant might not be the offender, or the whole incident could be retaliation for some known or perceived slight. I'll often ask the tenant for their response to the complaint in writing. Good documentation is better than a good memory any day. Giselle, a memorable tenant. Let me tell you about the saga of Giselle. Giselle was a tenant of mine in a condominium unit I owned on the second floor. She was a single parent of a 5-year-old boy and had been in the unit for about a year when the complaint started. A new owner had moved in the unit below Giselle and sent a complaint to the property manager PM about the amount of noise emanating from my tenant at all hours of the day and night. The noise complaints were about laughing being heard from the balcony, a kid playing so loudly the occasional thumping could be heard down the hallway of the unit below, a door slamming, chairs scraping across the floor in the dining room, and the toilet flushing so many times in an hour that it was ridiculous. The complaints were endless. The complaint didn't have any dates, times, or duration regarding the noise, so there was really nothing that I could investigate. However, I did call Giselle to let her know we'd received a complaint, and I'd be in touch if we received another. A few weeks later, I received a complaint that Giselle was flicking cigarette butts off her balcony and landing on the patio of the owner below, as well as all over the grass. This was a serious complaint, and I knew my tenant smoked on her balcony. I made an appointment with Giselle to meet. Before going up to the apartment, I looked at the area in question and saw hundreds of cigarette butts on the grass. I took photos from a few angles, including the grass area and the whole side of the condo building. Then I went to see Giselle, told her about the complaint, and she insisted it wasn't her. She took me out to the balcony and showed me her large can of cigarette butts that was halfway full with likely 100+ butts, and explained she always properly disposed of her butts. I took a picture of the can with the cigarette butts. I also looked over the balcony and took a picture of the area littered with butts. The concentration was much higher on the left than the right. In fact, the highest concentration of butts was so far over, I doubted my tenant could flick a cigarette butt that far, even with the help of the wind. Giselle was grateful I had investigated and promised to send me her response to the complaint by email that afternoon. When I got back to my office, I laid out the evidence and determined the highest concentration of cigarette butts was to the left of Giselle's unit and more in front of the other stack of units. Some were in front of Giselle's unit, but it was a low concentration. The cigarette butts on the ground had a white filter and were pretty consistent, but the butts in Giselle's can had a brown filter. The two types of cigarettes did not appear to be the same. My photo of the building showed a number of people sitting on their balconies, and at least 2 were smoking. I could not see the type of cigarette being smoked, but one of the people smoking was on the same riser stack of units where the highest concentration of cigarette butts was located. My investigation revealed that it was unlikely the complaint regarding the cigarette butts on the lawn was from my tenant. Was it possible for me to determine if my tenant ever tossed a cigarette butt off the balcony? Nope. Nor could I determine where the butt that landed on the patio of the unit below had come from. But with the evidence collected, the culprit was likely someone other than my tenant. I provided all the information to the condominium's PM and suggested they follow up accordingly. After a thorough investigation, I was able to close this particular complaint file without action against my tenant. But what might have happened if I hadn't done a complete investigation? Tethy.